The clock struck midnight, and the house was completely still except for the slight creak of my bedroom door gradually opening. My heart froze for a second as I whirled swiftly, only to see Daniel, my 21-year-old nephew, standing there. His gaze fastened on mine, and I froze, grasping the edge of the blanket that barely covered me. "Daniel," I snarled, tightening the cover, my voice shaking. "What are you doing here? You should be sleeping." He did not respond quickly. Instead, he moved farther into the dimly lighted chamber, his face partially shadowed, but his expression inscrutable. "I heard sounds," he explained. Finally, his voice was calm yet forceful, as if you could need assistance. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, my mind racing to find an explanation. The truth was unthinkable to share. I was just restless. "You shouldn't be barging in like that." My voice cracked despite my effort to sound composed. But Daniel didn't leave. His gaze seemed too piercing, as if he could see through the flimsy barrier of words I was trying to hide behind. He stood there, his presence filling the room with an unsettling tension, and I couldn't bring myself to move or speak further. "What's wrong?" he asked, his tone softer now, but laced with something. I couldn't place concern, curiosity, something else entirely. I shook my head, avoiding his eyes. "Nothing, just go back to bed." Instead of leaving, he stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You're lying." The air in the room felt heavy, the silence stretching longer than it should have. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure he could hear it. Daniel leaned slightly forward, his movements slow and deliberate. "Tell me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now what's really going on?" Daniel's words hung in the air, daring me to respond, but I couldn't. My throat tightened and I felt trapped under his gaze. Finally, I managed to pull myself together. "Daniel, this is inappropriate," I said, my voice low but firm. "Just go back to your room." He tilted his head, his dark hair falling slightly into his eyes. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what's going on." "Aunt Zara." The sound of my name on his lips sent a chill through me, not because of the words themselves, but because of how he said them. There was something unsettling in his tone, a mix of defiance and curiosity, as if he'd uncovered a secret but wasn't quite sure how to handle it. "Zara," he repeated, softer this time, as if testing the weight of the name. Daniel the first snapped, trying to regain control of the situation. "You're crossing a line. Get out of here." But instead of leaving, he stepped closer, his movements deliberate and slow. "You've been acting strange all evening. At dinner you barely spoke, and now this." He gestured vaguely around the room, his eyes narrowing, as if piecing together a puzzle. My pulse quickened. He was too perceptive, too intuitive, and it unnerved me. "It's nothing. I was just thinking." I stammered, hating how weak my excuses sounded. Daniel crossed his arms, leaning casually against the edge of the bed, thinking, about what. I clenched the blanket tighter, wishing it could shield me from his questions. "Daniel, stop this," I pleaded, my voice breaking for a moment. He said nothing. Then, with a slight smirk, he asked, "Is it because of what I said earlier about you deserving more than what you have?" My heart skipped a beat. Earlier that evening, during a casual conversation, he had made a passing comment about how I seemed too alone for someone like me at the time. I had brushed it off with a forced laugh, but now his words came rushing back with a new weight. "You remember that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of course, I do." His chuckle disappeared, replaced by a more serious appearance. "You are my Aunt Zara. I care about you, maybe more than I should." The room grew quiet, and his words lingered, weighty and unsaid. As I attempted to comprehend what he had just spoken, my thoughts begged for me to say something, anything, to relieve the intolerable stress. But I could not. And suddenly, before I could respond, Daniel stretched out to gently lay his hand on mine. "You don't have to be alone anymore," he murmured. I could feel his fingers gently brushing against mine, but I quickly pulled my hand away, my heart pounding in my chest. Daniel, what are you doing? I asked, my voice cracking from the rush of emotions flooding through me. If you enjoyed Silent Secrets, like, share, and subscribe for more intense twists. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you do? Stay tuned for more shocking stories. Text message. His expression shifted, one moment serious, the next almost sad, as if he could sense the internal struggle warring inside me. I just want to help you, Aunt Zara. I'm not trying to make things harder for you. His words were calm, but the intensity behind them made my stomach churn. I couldn't believe this was happening. My own nephew, the boy I had seen grow up, was standing here in my room, looking at me with a mix of affection and something darker, something more dangerous. You don't need to help me, I said firmly, standing up and moving toward the window, trying to put some distance between us. I'm fine. I've always been fine. But Daniel followed me, his footsteps soft against the floor. No, you're not. I can see it in your eyes. You've been hiding something, Aunt Zara. He stepped closer again, this time standing so close that I could feel his breath on my neck. I spun around to face him, my back pressed against the cool glass of the window. You have no idea what you're talking about. He didn't back off. Instead, he seemed to grow more resolute. I think I do. His eyes never left mine, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something, fear, regret in his gaze. You've been so distant lately. He hesitated, almost as if unsure of whether he should continue what I asked, my voice barely a whisper now, the silence in the room growing unbearable. Daniel took a deep breath, his eyes searching mine. I'm afraid you'll push me away, that you'll shut me out like you did with everyone else. A sharp pang of guilt hit me. I had been isolating myself more and more in recent months, ever since the incident with my husband Mark. But Daniel had no way of knowing about that. No one did. I'm not like everyone else. Daniel continued, his voice gentle yet insistent. I can see through your walls, Aunt Celine. I know you're not okay. A long, uncomfortable silence stretched between us. My mind raced and I felt cornered in a way I hadn't expected. His words were too close to the truth. You don't understand. I finally whispered, my voice shaking. You don't know what it's like to feel so alone. Daniel's eyes softened, and for a moment I almost thought I saw a hint of sympathy in them. But then, before I could process it, he stepped even closer, closing the gap between us until we were almost nose to nose. I'm not going anywhere, Aunt Zara, he said softly, his voice filled with an intensity that made my heart race. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. I didn't know what to say. The tension between us was thick, almost suffocating, and I could feel the heat. Daniel reached out again, but this time not to touch me. Instead, he delicately picked Mark's framed portrait off the adjoining dresser, scrutinizing it with a curious combination of fascination and resistance. I know it has to do with him, Eli Lowe. It's written all over your face every time his name comes up. My breath hitched. He couldn't possibly know about Mark's treachery, the lies, and the empty promises. It was a wound that I had carefully buried. But now, with Daniel standing there, his presence unraveling the walls I had so meticulously built, I felt exposed. You don't know what you're talking about, I said, a weak attempt to dismiss him. Daniel's gaze locked onto mine, unrelenting. Then tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't feel like you're drowning. Like there's no one who actually sees you anymore. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. How could he read me so clearly? Why do you even care? I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. He didn't flinch. Instead, he set the photo back down with deliberate care and took a step closer, his tone softening. Because I see you, Celine. I always have. His words hit me like a tidal wave there. It was raw, unfiltered honesty. It wasn't just concern or sympathy. It was something deeper, something I wasn't prepared for. You don't mean that? I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of the moment. I do. His reply was immediate, unwavering. You've spent so much time pretending to be strong for everyone else, but who's strong for you? You don't have to do this alone anymore. A knot tightened in my chest. His words were everything I had longed to hear but never allowed myself to believe. Yet the implications terrified me. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of emotions swirling around us. This is wrong. You're my nephew, and you're my aunt. He countered, his voice steady but edged with a quiet desperation. But that doesn't mean I can't care about you. That doesn't mean I can't want to help you in ways no one else has. The room felt impossibly small, the air thick with unspoken truths. My heart raced, torn between the urge to flee and the strange pull to stay. I don't need your help, I said, though even I didn't believe the words. Daniel smiled faintly, a sadness in his eyes. Maybe not, but you deserve it anyway. His words lingered in the air as silence fell between us. I turned away, staring out the window into the darkness, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. What had I gotten myself into? But as the seconds stretched on, I couldn't ignore the small, treacherous part of me that felt a spark of relief, maybe even hope that someone finally saw the cracks in my armor. As I stood by the window trying to process everything Daniel had just said, a chill swept over me. His words echoed in my mind like a haunting Milo. You it any. What did he mean by that? Was it genuine care, or was there something more he wasn't saying? I turned back to face him, but he had taken a step back. His posture relaxed, almost as if he were giving me space to breathe. The subtle shift in his demeanor made the air feel even heavier. Aunt Zara, he said quietly, his voice almost too soft. I can see that you're struggling, and I don't want to push you, but I can't take seeing you like this anymore. I swallowed hard, my throat tight from emotion. I told you I didn't need your aid. Daniel, you're just a child. You have no idea what it is like to feel broken. Daniel's countenance deepened, and his lips tightened into a narrow line. I'm not a kid anymore, he added, with calm certainty. I may not understand precisely what you're going through, but I know what it's like to ache. And I know that sometimes the only way to heal is to let someone in. I could feel his eyes on me, waiting for some kind of response, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. His words were so raw, so full of understanding, it made my chest tighten. How could I tell him that I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of my own guilt, that I couldn't let anyone see how far gone I felt? I can't let you do this, Daniel, I whispered, my voice trembling. You're too close. This is all wrong. For a moment he didn't say anything. He just stood there studying me, his eyes never leaving mine. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You're not the only one who's been hiding." My heart skipped a beat. His words were like a poo to the gut. What did he mean? Had he been keeping something from me? What do you mean by that? I asked, my voice almost strangled with a sudden surge of fear. Daniel's gaze shifted, his eyes briefly flickering with something I couldn't quite place. I'm not the perfect nephew you think I am, he said, his tone heavy with unspoken secrets. I've been dealing with my own struggles, things you wouldn't understand. I felt a chill run through me, the air growing colder by the second. What was he talking about? What was he hiding? Before I could ask more, Daniel stepped forward again, his hand reaching out for mine. This time I didn't pull away. The way he looked at me, the weight in his eyes, it was as if he was asking me to trust him, to share in the vulnerability that we both seemed to be carrying. I don't want to hurt you, Aunt Celine, Daniel said, his voice barely audible. I just want to make things better. I don't want to watch you suffer alone anymore. My pulse quickened as his fingers brushed mine once more, and for the first time in so long, I felt a flicker of warmth, something that had been missing for years. But was this the kind of warmth I needed? Was it a step towards healing, or was it leading me down a dangerous path? I couldn't return from the room, felt suffocating as I fought with myself. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. All I could do was stand there, torn between the comfort Daniel offered and the fear that I was teetering on the edge of something that could destroy everything I had left. I could feel the weight of Daniel's hand still hovering just inches from mine, as if waiting for my permission to bridge the distance that had always kept us separate. His words had left a mark on me, but it was the silence in the air that was deafening. Now, why are you doing this? I asked the question slipping from my lips before I could stop it. Why are you so determined to make me see things your way? Daniel didn't pull his hand back. Instead, he leaned in slightly, as though trying to close the gap between us in more ways than one. Because I know you, Aunt Sen, he said softly. I know what you need, even if you don't want to admit it. I swallowed, my pulse racing. What do I need? He paused, his gaze lingering on mine with an intensity that made me want to look away, but couldn't. You need someone who recognizes you for who you really are, rather than merely as the ideal mother, wife, or aunt. You need someone who recognizes that you are just as human as everyone else, including me. I'm the one who notices that his comments are piercing through the layers of armor that I've spent years constructing. Every word was like peeling away the armor I'd worn so carefully, and the raw vulnerability I was left with was terrifying. But what scared me the most wasn't just Daniel's closeness. It was the realization that I had wanted to be seen, wanted to feel understood more than anything in the world. You're wrong, I said, my voice hoarse. I don't need this. I don't need you to save me. But even as I spoke, I knew it wasn't true. I had been drowning for so long, and Daniel had somehow managed to throw me a lifeline I wasn't sure I was ready to grab. Daniel's lips curved into a sad, knowing smile. You can keep pretending, Aunt Celine, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to give up on you. A sharp pain shot through me at his words. The idea of someone, especially him, being so persistent, so determined to be a part of my life, in a way I couldn't control, was overwhelming. I felt like I was losing control of everything, but I also couldn't deny the warmth his presence brought. For a brief moment, I let my guard down. I let my hand hover close to his, just enough to feel the heat of his fingers. But I pulled back just before contact could be made. I'm not sure I can trust you with this, Daniel, I whispered almost to myself. Everything's so messed up. I've been so messed up. Daniel's eyes softened, and for a split second, I saw something else there. Something that wasn't just determination but empathy. You don't have to be perfect, Aunt Zara. You just have to let me in. Before I could reply, I was startled awake by a familiar noise coming from below. The front door creaked open, followed by the sound of footsteps along the hallway. I stopped, my heart missing a beat. Mark, I mumbled beneath my breath as terror rose in my chest. Daniel's look quickly changed to one of caution, and he took an involuntary step back to distance himself. I'm not going anywhere, Zara, he said quietly, but there was a new urgency in his voice. You need to be careful. There's more going on here than you know. With that, he quickly turned, slipping quietly out of the room, leaving me standing there alone again, caught between the two men who had changed the course of my life in ways I didn't fully understand. The sound of Mark's voice calling my name echoed up the stairs. My chest tightened as I struggled to gather my thoughts. What had Daniel meant by that? What was going on that I wasn't seeing? The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in on me. I was spiraling, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep it all together. The sound of Mark's footsteps grew louder as he neared the bottom of the stairs. I stood frozen, unable to move as my mind raced with all the conflicting emotions swirling inside me. Daniel's words echoed in my ears, but I couldn't process them fully. Not now. Not with Mark, so close. When Mark reached the top of the stairs, his presence filled the hallway. He called my name again, his tone casual, unaware of the storm I was caught in. Zara, you up here? I forced a smile, though it felt hollow. Yeah, just a minute. I'll be down in a second. I quickly gathered myself, trying to push the thoughts of Daniel to the back of my mind. I had to focus. I had to appear normal even if nothing felt normal anymore. But as I turned to head toward the door, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror across the room. My reflection seemed distant, almost foreign, and I couldn't help but wonder, who was I becoming? As I made my way downstairs, the tension in the air thickened. Mark was waiting for me in the living room, his casual demeanor masking the underlying uncertainty in his eyes. He wasn't the same person he used to be. The carefree, confident man I married. There was something different about him, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Everything okay? he asked, looking me over as I entered the room. I nodded quickly, but there was a hesitation in my voice that I couldn't hide. Yeah, just tired. Mark's gaze softened, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He didn't fully buy my excuse, but he didn't press. Instead, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face, a gesture that once felt comforting but now seemed foreign. "Zara," he said quietly, his hand lingering near my cheek. "I know we've been through a lot, but I need you to trust me. We'll figure this out together for a moment." I nearly believed him. His words, the familiar warmth of his touch, made me want to return to the safety of the life we'd created. But then, I recalled Daniel's words, the warning he had given me, and my heart wrenched as I realized I was torn between two people, two lives, and two very different versions of myself. "I'd want to believe you, Mark," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, "but I don't know if I can anymore." Before he could respond, there was a sudden knock at the door. It was sharp, insistent, and it sent a wave of dread through me. Mark's face hardened, his expression shifting to one of caution. "I'll get it," he said. His voice clipped as he stood up to answer the door. I watched him walk away, my heart racing. Who could it be at this hour? I didn't have to wait long to find out. Mark returned a moment later, his face pale, his body stiff. "It's Daniel," he said, his voice low. "He needs to talk to you." The shock of hearing Daniel's name in this context hit me like a ton of bricks. The last thing I wanted was for Daniel to be here, especially not with Mark in the same room. "Why? What does he want?" I asked. I'm trying to keep the worry out of my voice. Mark paused. Before speaking, he said that it was urgent. He claims to know something about what has happened between us. My heart sank. What might Daniel know? What did he see in Zara? Mark's voice became more urgent, his tone sharpening. "Do you want me to allow him inside?" I stood there, entangled in a web of lies and secrets, unsure what to do. I wasn't sure if I should confront Daniel and risk everything unraveling, or I should safeguard my marriage by denying him the chance to speak.